And so I'm going to invite up Precious.
Hi, ladies. My name is Precious. That's my real name. I've been married to Fidel for 16 years now, and we have 7 daughters. Our oldest 2 adopted girls, Lizzie and Loom, are 25 and 24, and they are back home in Cameroon. Here with us in the photo are Neraya, who is 15, Salma, 13, Johanna, 11, Essie, 7, and Tiana, 4. It's such a blessing to be here with you today and share a little bit about my story, even though I'm so nervous, and what God has been teaching me in my marriage. A scripture that has been an anchor for me through life is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." So a little bit about my story. I am from Cameroon, a country in Central Africa. That's where the accent is from. And I moved to the United States with my family 12 years ago. I grew up going to church as a cultural thing, and I was baptized as an infant. However, I did not have a personal relationship with the Lord. I came to know Christ while I was in college at a campus fellowship called Academic Campus Fellowship. A coursemate invited me to a program at this fellowship. When I got there, I encountered boys and girls who knew the Lord. I knew they had something I didn't have. I got convicted of my sin and surrendered my life to Christ. Becoming born again is the best decision I ever made. What brought us to the States, you might ask? I won the Diversity Visa Lottery, also known as the DV Lottery. It's a program that the US government offers to allow people from other countries to immigrate to the United States. In the first year of our marriage, my husband asked me to take my photo, give him the information needed to play the lottery, which I did. He then played the DV lottery for our family. And to my surprise, I won. When you win, you get to travel with your immediate family, that's your spouse and kids, to the United States. Fidel did not initially want to come to the States. That was because he had a well-paying job back home. You see, most people in Cameroon would move to America to seek better opportunities and, by extension, more money. Fidel thought that we were already well off and we did not need to move. That's because his job supported our family well. I kept praying about it, asking God that if it was his will, he would let us move. Since we hadn't planned to move, we hadn't processed any of the documents that would allow us come to the States. Well, a few months before the expiration date of processing our documents, Fidel was suddenly fired from his wonderful job. When he got fired, he took that as a sign and immediately started processing our papers to move here. Because his termination was sudden, his employer paid him a large sum of money as a termination fee. That fee was the money that helped us process all our papers, pay for our flights, and even move to the States with some change. I see that as God's provision. I had big dreams coming to the United States. My plan was to work and help my parents and siblings back home. My dad had supported me to be educated up to master's degree level, and I was expected to work and help the family in return. When we got here, I discovered working wasn't such a great idea anymore. I had 2 little girls to care for, and daycare was so expensive. So I became a stay-at-home mom, not by choice, but by necessity. It was one of the hardest times of my life. The cultural shock moving here was unbearable. You see, even as an introvert back home, I always had people around me. Friends stopping by to say hi, neighbors or family members randomly visiting me. But here, for the first time in my life, I was lonely. And my world shrunk to the size of our small town home. Being in a new country, I didn't have any friends, and the few people I knew were always so busy with work. My husband was working full-time, and I could not drive, so I couldn't go anywhere. I was stuck at home. I got pregnant around this time, and I missed the care that I would get from my family back home while going through morning sickness. I was miserable and often angry at my husband because he seemed to have a great life going to work while I just stayed home. I loved my kids so much, and I enjoyed spending time with them. But at that time, it was very hard for me to accept God's plan that I stay home with them. I kept asking myself, why would I go to school, get a master's degree, and become a stay-at-home mom? I wanted to do something outside of the home. I felt stuck at home and unproductive, caring for kids, cooking, and cleaning. Now I know that that's the best job I could ever do. I have always loved cooking. With all the stress I was facing at this time, cooking became an outlet for me, a way for me to just do something I loved and truly enjoyed. I cooked our cultural meals as a way to connect back to home. I experimented with making new foods, and I baked a lot of pastries. I enjoyed sharing pictures of my food on my Facebook page. As I kept cooking and sharing pictures of the food I was making on Facebook, I started getting a lot of private messages from online friends asking me for the recipes of the food pictures I shared. I found myself often typing recipes and sending them as direct messages. At that time, I had started a blog which was basically an online journal where I wrote about everything and anything from faith to family to stories about things that happened in the past and even news. And there are some pretty embarrassing things in there, so please don't look. I figured if I put these recipes on my blog, it would be easier to send people there. So that's how I started publishing recipes on my website. The more I published, the more requests I got for recipes. Then my audience started asking that I share videos of myself making the recipes because some of them were visual learners. That's how my YouTube channel was born. God took my little cooking hobby and transformed it into a food blog and a YouTube channel. I had to learn a lot along the way, but over time that became a business that I could run from home while still caring for my family. When I look back, I'm so appreciative of all the time I've spent with my kids. If I'm being honest, there are days when being a work-from-home mom and a wife feels like juggling 1,000 things at once. There are the everyday challenges like dealing with the chaos of mealtime, even for someone who loves cooking like me. It's so much work. There's the constant laundry pile, appointments to keep up with, and the ever-growing to-do list. But there are also the more personal, deeper struggles. I've had several moments when I felt overwhelmed by disagreements with my husband, feeling disconnected or frustrated, or just wondering how to keep going. But as I've learned through the years, one thing that has been consistent is this: God always resolves the problems in my marriage. His resolution doesn't always look like what I want, but God always comes through in his own way because he knows what is best for me. One of the scriptures that has been a huge encouragement to me is found in Philippians 4, verse 2-3, where Paul writes, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." This has been such a powerful reminder to me in moments of tension in my marriage. Humility, patience, and love are the foundation of keeping peace. Another scripture that encourages me in those hard moments is Philippians 4, 6-7, which says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer, and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." When things aren't going well in my marriage, I have found that anxiety can creep in. I begin to worry about the future, about whether things will ever get better, about what I need to do to fix things. But God reminds me in this verse that instead of being anxious, I should pray and give it all to him. When I do that, his peace settles over me. Peace that doesn't make any sense in the midst of struggle. It's a peace that guards my heart from bitterness and frustration and helps me to trust that he is working. When I get discouraged, I remind myself of the ways God has worked in the past. He brought me and my family to the States against the odds for his purpose. When my now 11-year-old daughter didn't speak for the first 3 years of her life, I prayed together with the ladies in my Bible study group and the ladies on my table here in TMoms. And God answered. God worked through speech therapy where she learned how to speak. Recently, I have felt like my marriage was falling apart. God is walking through my heart and my husband's heart. I have learned that when life gets tough, impossible, and feels empty, that's exactly where God loves to work. Luke 1:37 says, "For with God nothing will be impossible." So today I'll encourage you to hand over whatever feels unbearable in your life to God. Thank you.
I'm Kathy. This is Victoria. Actually, I've always known her as Victoria, but everybody kept calling her Vicky, so either one. So we're glad to be here today, and we have spent way too much time figuring out how to explain things to you. We started with a simple PowerPoint, and then we went to Victoria's idea of let's ask ChatGPT, and they made an amazing one, but it'd be more like for a college class. And so we thought, okay, well, what's really something that you might need to know about families with disabilities? So we went back to sort of the basics. And we're going to sort of tag team as far as I do not have any kids with disabilities myself. And so I know a mother's experience is much different than someone who has worked with kids in schools and worked with kids in other countries and worked with kids in church that have disabilities, but I don't know what it is 24/7 to parent a child with a disability. We have had provided respite care for some kids with disabilities so their parents could go on vacation, and it was all-consuming, middle of the night, feces spread on the wall in the bedroom, screaming, crying, vomiting, lots of kinds of things that I thought, oh my goodness, okay, I teach about this, but I am exhausted. And I know that that's how moms feel that have even a mild disability, because you're nervous about what people are gonna think, and you don't want people to come over to your house because it might not be pristinely, beautifully clean like I'm sure all of yours are. And so we wanted to sort of say, okay, what should moms know about families with disabilities? So Jeff, go ahead to the second one. I'm not gonna click, but I have it sort of here so that I can see where I am too. So, all right. I'm gonna read this just so you can hear it, because sometimes hearing it makes more sense than just reading it. How we look after our most vulnerable individuals says a lot about our society. Families affected by disability are very vulnerable, as we're going to continue to discuss. However, out of 200 EV-free churches from Los Angeles to Dallas, Texas, only 6 are actively seeking to minister to people with disabilities. Trinity is one of them. And so that shows you that the need is great, but Christians aren't even involved. You know, Christians aren't willing to step out of their comfort zone. Churches aren't willing to step out of their comfort zone. And so this is a very unique place where you are at this time in your life, that there are people who welcome children with disabilities in the kids ministry. There are people who welcome adults with disabilities. The junior high and high school group actually said, you know what? Our kids don't need any buddies anymore when they get to be junior high and high school, because they've grown up in Trinity Church, and people have accepted them, and people already know their quirks, and it's absolutely fine if there's noise during when we're teaching or if there's some running around. And so Trinity is very unique in that aspect. We have a long way to go, because as I've shared with Victoria, there's 60 or 70 adults that come to Trinity every Sunday, and probably 2 or 3 of you know 1 or 2 of their names. And so they meet in this room, they attend church, but they really don't have any friends outside of their own adults with disabilities. And so we have a long way to go to make sure that they come to women's events, that they come to men's events, that they're invited to sit with other people at the church picnic. That's not happening this Sunday because of the rain, but happening next week, that they get to go to the Man Up or Man Up Skills, or that they go to, that they're invited to other kinds of things that the church has going on. So, okay, next one. Okay, so we have all of these words here, and they're all true. They all are especially true for kids with disabilities. They're also especially true for kids without disabilities. I mean, when you get up in the morning with your newborn, it's unpredictable. You know, are they going to be fussy all day? Is it going to be a really calm day? Are they going to nap at the time that you expect them to nap? Then multiply that by the child has a disability and maybe at age 2 or 3 isn't able to communicate. And so there's lots of meltdowns because meltdowns are a way to communicate if you don't have words. And so unpredictable is just one of the words of your day and how overwhelming that might be. But I just wanted to just go over a couple Bible verses of what God says about disability. This is not on the PowerPoint. If you'd like it, I'd be glad to email it to you. Created with a purpose. So it's not an accident. God knew that the child inside the mother's womb was going to have a disability. Specifically created. Not just, oh, okay, well, there's 6 here and there's 4 here, and okay, there's not very many over here, so we need to have another 2 or 3 specifically created with the disability. Evidence of the works of God. So you may look at a child that's in a wheelchair, that doesn't communicate, that cries most of the time, and you think, what's that person's purpose? Well, God says that they are created with a purpose. Created in his image. So obviously his image is not necessarily being able to use oral language to communicate, because there's a lot of people that don't. Created in his image doesn't necessarily mean being able to walk, because there's a lot of people that don't. Being able to see, a lot of people can't see. And so we sort of have to think of what is his image? And lots of people have done research in that, and theologians have discussed it, and they've sort of come to the conclusion that the image of God is in need of relationship. So your babies are in need of relationship. Your 2-year-olds are in need of relationship. You as an adult are in need of relationship. So that's sort of an interesting way of looking at God's image. And Jesus, when he walked the earth, had many, many relationships too. In need of salvation. So many times people, even from Trinity, have come and say, why do you continue to teach in light and power? There's some people who are just drinking coffee and then walking around and vocalizing, and then they go like this, and then they go like this. And how are they going to know that Jesus died for them? Well, church for them may be they get a cup of coffee and people smile at them and want to sit by them. So in need of salvation, I don't think God made people with disabilities and then sends them to hell because they don't know the 4 spiritual laws. And so there is an aspect of spiritual growth for each person. Not the result of personal sin. In other countries, I'm sure Precious and I'm sure Victoria could tell you stories in Kenya and in Cameroon where, oh, you had an affair when you were in high school? That's why you have a kid now with a disability. Or your husband cheated on you, and so that's why you have a kid with a disability. You maybe had a drink when you weren't supposed to be drinking. That's why your kid has a disability. It's not a result of sin, because if it is, then all of our kids would have a disability because we are all sinners. Not the result of a lack of faith. It also says that each person is complete in Christ, whether or not they have a disability. God's sovereignty for the community. No favoritism. Reveals wrong traditions. So right now, our tradition in church and in Sunday school is you sit, you listen, you get up when you're asked to get up, you stand when you're asked to stand for worship. You don't go in and out of the worship service 5 times every time you need a drink, but you'll see people doing that in our church. You don't run around the circle when it's time to sit for the circle. These are all like traditions that we have for church, but it's not necessarily the tradition God has for worship. If you think of the Sermon on the Mount, with the feeding of the 5,000, I'm sure that children were crying. Some dad slapped a kid because he was talking back. Somebody has a seizure. Somebody barfs. Somebody goes and pees on a tree. Somebody yells out, "No, Mom!" And all of that is part of worship. In that particular situation, it doesn't have to be quietly nodding or getting to the right place in your Bible or standing up and figuring out, am I supposed to put my hands like this, or do I raise them? Or, okay, I'll just pretend like I'm doing my hair because I don't want anybody to think that I'm raising my hands wrong. And the last verse that I really like is, the people with disabilities, or the people that we feel seem weaker, are actually indispensable. So indispensable means you can't live without them. So why do you think churches are content to live without people with disabilities? What would be one of your responses? Easier, much easier. Anything else? Yeah.
Being able to worship God without interruptions.
Okay. Being able to worship God in the way that you've always worshiped God without interruptions.
Not enough volunteers.
What? Not enough volunteers? Yeah.
Not knowing where to start on accommodations.
Okay. Thinking you need a big program before you can start to do it. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, there was an example in our church service. I'm going to speak from an adult perspective. There was a woman that attends Light and Power. She's nonverbal, has Down syndrome, really smiley, really friendly, and she loves to walk around in Light and Power and sit by the men especially and put her head on their chest and then pat their head and say, "You're cute," or whatever the words that she knows by then. And she walks around, everybody accepts her. Well, her mom decided one time, "I really want to go to the church service." I said, "Great, everybody's invited to go to the church service." So she took her into the church, and this woman went to 4 or 5 different places during the first 10 or 15 minutes, sat by somebody, patted their head, touched their shoulder, and then waved goodbye, and then went to another place in the service. And people wrote letters to the pastor saying, "Can we pay to have someone watch her outside? Can she just go to Light and Power and not go to church? It bothered my worship." And fortunately, the pastors wrote back and said, "No, absolutely not. We're not doing anything different. She is invited just like anyone else. It was her very first time in the service. Probably she's going to see after a couple more times that people don't do that they sort of sit and they can whisper, but they don't walk around to 5 different places, and she may or may not continue to do that, but we're not changing because we're more interested in people being accepted than keeping our traditions." And that freaked out a lot of people. I don't think her mother ever brought her back. They usually leave after Light and Power because the mom was so embarrassed because she got the letter too. It was copied to her. And so there's something about our society that when these things come out, we're like, we'd rather not be involved. And so how many of you know a young mom with a child that has a disability? Okay, good. Quite a few people. All right. Okay, so all of you should be raising your hand because Victoria has a daughter with a disability. You may or may not know that if you're not at her table group, but that's why I wanted her perspective on parenting things. So let me just see this next one here. All right. Let's see a few things moms are saying. Okay, so I'm going to ask Victoria questions during this time. But the first thing that moms say is, even though my kid has a disability, that sort of pales in comparison to how people treat me. So yes, I know my kid has a disability, but they may be running up and down the aisle of the grocery store while I'm trying to get the Raisin Bran, and people stare at me, and sometimes they even say, "What's wrong with your kid?" rather than thinking, okay, well, my kid has run up and down the grocery store aisle before, and they've asked for the Lucky Charms, and I've told them no, and they scream and cry. So why are we so upset when we see a kid with a disability? So what's a few things, Victoria, that you've seen when you're out in the community, when you're with Janelle? How do people usually respond?
Thank you. That's a good question. And part of it, it's just what you spoke about, even like the issue with the letter writing and all that. Because, and I agree with whoever said it's so unpredictable when it comes to kids with disabilities. And we'll go to a simple park outing, and it sounds simple, but at the end of the day, we might all go home in tears because whatever will happen there, you did not plan for it. You never are fully prepared for whatever will happen. Sometimes it will go great, but sometimes it will be just awful. And it goes from simple as them trying to be friendly or social, because that's what we've been working towards and working for the last 9 months. We're trying to teach these social skills and all that, and it goes from them trying to be social, and they're trying to talk to everyone, and people not wanting the interaction because, again, let's be fair, sometimes it gets awkward to people too because it can be overly social, not the normal hi and little chat and you go. They want to be there. They want to do what you're doing, even if you don't want to do that. They want to taste your drink. You have to be looking because they might find a drink there and they'll grab and taste. They want to play with kids, but they want the kids to do what they want, not what the kids are doing, or the kids don't even want them to do what the kids are doing, part of that. And it ends up in meltdowns. And then you end up having to apologize over and over and over to people, especially parents, because, I understand as a parent, I want to defend my kid. I want my kids to be comfortable. I took them out for a parking outing. To the park, to the park, not parking, but to the park to play. And now they are being uncomfortable. As a parent, I would want to try to work towards that. But at the same time, as parents of neurodivergent kids, what can we do to help our kids accommodate these kids that are neurodivergent, right? Neurotypical kids parents, what can we do for our kids to accommodate these neurodivergent kids? That's a question that comes. And so sometimes you end up having to apologize over and over to parents about just an inconvenience that came by because your child was trying to be a child. And so it's so stressful even getting anywhere, doing anything. The staring, I've gotten to the point where I ignore the staring now because it's loud. Like everyone is staring at you whenever everything is going wrong. And the meltdowns are just huge. And sometimes nothing you do helps. Nothing you do helps as a parent of a child with a disability. You try to bring them back to a place of calming down, but everything you try just makes it worse, right? So sometimes it's just easy to just stay at home instead of going out in the community because things will happen and they will not go well. Most likely it will not go well when you're out in the community. Sensory overload, all things that can go wrong possibly will go wrong. So you just have to be prepared to accept what comes your way.
Yeah. And I think that all of you getting your kids ready to come here or to come to church is a big deal. I mean, you got the diaper bag and you have the snacks, and if you're going to go somewhere afterwards, you have to have additional snacks and thinking of, okay, when is the nap time? And then factor in a child with a disability. Are they going to be happy in the car? Are they going to try to get out of their car seat? Are they going to kick and scream because you went a different direction home and they wanted to go by that blue car that they always see on a certain street? And so it is very easy for families with kids with disabilities just to stay home. I mean, it's a big deal to even get to church. You know, do they have their shoes? Did they put underwear on? Did they brush their teeth? Are they going to jump out of the car and run across the parking lot? So there's so many things to sort of remember about the unpredictability and the stress of a parent with a child with disability. Okay. Did we do the side that says the realities of disability pale in comparison? Okay, we talked about that. So including Christians can be super, super unkind. And given, sort of backing up for a minute, when a pastor goes to seminary, they learn about single moms, they learn about men addicted to porn, they learn about struggling marriages, they learn about junior high kids, ministry to high school kids. Probably only 1 or 2 seminaries across the United States say anything about families with disabilities or adults with disabilities. And so given that pastors haven't been trained, when they're in preaching a sermon and there's some kind of vocalization that is not like amen or thank you or hooray or whatever would be in response, or if they're a children's pastor and the kids are running out of the classroom or not wanting to sit at circle time, really they had no training in how to help families with disabilities, which is not an excuse because there's lots of things in the Bible that say about that. But it is a very big black hole in seminary training that pastors don't even talk about it. And then you think, what about mental illness? There's no classes on that in a seminary. So pastors probably, if they don't have depression themselves, they're thinking, oh, okay, I just counseled someone with depression. Why can't they just wake up happy? Why can't they look outside and see, oh, it's beautiful and green today? Why can't they just be happy rather than thinking, okay, if you have seizures, you take seizure meds. If you have diabetes, you take insulin. If you have depression, you need therapy and probably Prozac. And there's nothing that's wrong with any of that. It's just part of being a person. And so you won't hear very many sermons on mental illness or disability. And so I'm glad that you guys are listening today. And this, I think, Megan, you put the PowerPoint up on your website already? Or, okay, somebody will. Okay, next one, Jeff. Okay, so listening without judging. So if you invite Vicki to your house or to a park and she says, oh my goodness, last night was terrible. My kids were up 3 times. They didn't want the breakfast that I prepared for them, even when they chose that breakfast at the grocery store. I don't know how rest time's gonna go today. I keep hearing from the teacher that my child's not following the rules in class. It's probably would be easy for you to try to give advice. But all of us just love to vent, and we want people to listen to us without judging and without having to respond to anything. Just, that sounds really hard. You would love for your husband to say that, when you talk about your day, rather than like, well, if you got them up a little earlier, or if you didn't have your mother come visit, just like, oh man, your day does sound hard. How can I help? So, and push aside the tendency to say it's going to be all better. Because kids with disabilities are teenagers with disabilities, are young adults with disabilities, are older adults with disabilities. It's not something that you grow out of. And so it's not going to get all better. It's going to be ups and downs, just like any kind of parenting is. All right, next one. I may feel guilty when I have waves of grief about little things. So if you have a friend with a child with disability, or a parent even that has dementia, any kind of disability that's affecting their family, they're going to feel really guilty about stuff. Oh, if I had just followed that ABA therapy a little bit more with my child. Oh, if I had just been kinder to my father when he repeated the same thing 5 times. Oh, if I had just fill in the blank. We all feel guilty about things, and especially parents. As you heard Vicki say, I keep apologizing, or I have to say I'm sorry, or it's just not worth going anymore because of all of the work that it takes to even go to the park. Okay, next one. Okay, parenting is hard for all of us. Oops, I had an ad pop up. I want others to rejoice when my child reaches milestones, even if they come months or years later than other children. So your kids, your babies are getting to the point where they can lift up their head and they do better at tummy time. Or if they're 2 and 3-year-olds, they're helping out by taking a dirty diaper to the diaper container, or they help chop the carrots with those little knives you can buy that are kid-friendly. Maybe a 5 or 6-year-old's not doing that, but at age 7, maybe they actually turn and give eye contact when mom calls their name. And so rejoice with that when your friend talks about, my kid is recognizing their name. They actually turned around when I said their name. And so little kinds of things that you guys have already experienced with your kids are going to come later for parents with disability, for parents that have a disabled child. Anything you want to add to that as far as milestones?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, just from experience, and most of you, honestly, my friends here and the people that I know are already doing this when it comes to celebrating milestones. I have had people walk to me and like, I was in this room and Gina was there and she did this. And I'm like, I've not seen that. And they're celebrating that small win with us. Because every little milestone when it comes to kids or people with disabilities, it's huge for their families. And the reason I say it's huge, and those who have kids with disabilities will agree with me that Monday through Sunday, that parent probably has only heard negative things about their child. When it comes to school, to therapy, to everywhere they go, all they've heard is they're not doing this, they should be doing this, and all that. And one simple celebration that you noticed and being intentional about it and just pointing it out can go a long way in lifting that parent's spirit and also giving them hope amidst all of it. I'll give an example. This past week, Sherry's school big and I met at Costco. I made a brave decision to go with my kids, both of them, for shopping in Costco. I haven't done that for a long time. And the last time we did, we abandoned the cart somewhere full of things and just left because none of us could take it anymore. But this Monday, I decided to go, and I met Sherry there, coincidentally, and she was surprised. She has a child with special needs, so she fully understands what that means. She's gone through it. And at the time I was just going through it, I probably repeated myself 1,000 times. They were getting into everything. But we successfully checked out everything we took from Costco and got 3/4 of everything that I had in my list in the cart. And so that was a huge thing. And at the time, I celebrated my kids. My son should not have ice cream, but I took them for an ice cream date because they did great. And they kept saying, we did great, we did great. My daughter was shouting at the top of the roof that she did great, even when we got home. And the following day, I got a call from Sherry. I missed the call. She left a voicemail because I was working at the time she called. And she just pointed out how brave I was to be at Costco with my 2 kids. And she was checking in first to see if I'm okay. She didn't know if we made it out of Costco okay and safe. But then also she did point out how brave that was and how great my kids were doing at the time we met her. It was at the start of the shopping, so they were still doing great, but they still did great all through. So that's to say, just pointing it out, listening to that voicemail, it brought me to tears just to hear someone else is noticing. So I'm not daydreaming when I say there's progress. And someone else is noticing and is celebrating that. So just being intentional, looking out for those small things that you can celebrate and let the parent know or the kid know as well. Speak to them directly. They understand. Even if they might not respond, they do understand when we acknowledge them. Thank you.
Awesome. That's great. And so Sherry, every time she goes to Costco, she needs to call you. Yeah, so. Okay, next one. All right, you probably heard underneath what Vicki has been saying, that parenting in general can be very lonely. You're home, your newborn is screaming, or your 2-year-old wants to watch Bluey, and they've already watched Bluey for the last 2 hours, and you want them to do something else. So it's hard to be a parent. Magnify that with a parent with special needs, and they're very, very lonely. So think about ways that even a neighbor of yours that might have a child with special needs, think about ways that you can be helpful. Like make them lunch when you're out at coffee, pick up extra coffee for them, fold laundry as you guys chat, offer to pick up milk and lettuce from the grocery store, because delivering it from a friend is much easier than DoorDash or your Walmart subscription that you have for delivery. Bring by a different toy from the thrift store. So if you know that that child only likes Paw Patrol, there's tons of Paw Patrol toys at the thrift store that might be different than what they've had. So pick that up for 50 cents and drop it by, because then you're saying, I see you. You don't have to be lonely in this. I understand the Paw Patrol is obsession. I wanted to bring you a different toy. So questions or comments about that, especially for Victoria? All right, we'll continue to go on then. Next one. My other children are part of my story too. So I think that's very hard for a family if they have one child with a disability and two that don't, how to balance. My one child has ABA therapy, 3 times a week for 2 hours. How do I make that up to the other child? How do I keep things like the attention that one is getting when they're screaming and kicking on the floor? How do I make sure that I'm giving attention to the one that's not doing that? So trying to balance that. Families really don't want to be seen as a special family, because my husband has this research article that he's writing that there's no such thing as special. Because special, even though it's special ed, when you're said, oh, my family is special, the only thing you think about, oh, something's wrong, or someone has a disability, rather than every family is special because your kids are special to you. And so even that term is sort of hard. Because it makes families seem different or apart. Well, that's a special family, or that's a family with special needs, rather than thinking, okay, it's a family, and they have difficulties in this area just like every family has difficulties. All right, next one. Parents end up having self-talk to themselves, like at 1:30 in the morning, I'm sure Victoria wakes up and thinks, oh man, I should have handled that differently. Or the teacher is so negative and I responded negatively in a text message. Or my husband says that maybe I need to try a different food for my child, but I know that it's going to end up on the floor and all over them, and they're going to sit and cry for half an hour. So my self-talk is, I'm not a good mom. I need help with this. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel guilty because I snapped at my kid. I don't want to take stares from others too seriously. Like Vicki said, she doesn't even bother with the stares anymore because she's so used to people just staring. Humor can be a wonderful distraction. I was hoping that there was a gal named Jenna. She drives with her family from Rancho Cucamonga to Trinity, because Trinity's the only church that will serve her children. She has 3 kids with nonverbal autism. So she said the stress level is just so difficult. Her husband works full-time up in Apple Valley, so it's a commute an hour each way. So an 8-hour day turns into a 10-hour day because of the commute. And so she needs to take her kids to the grocery store. There's a lot of behavioral challenges, especially when there's a line when to check out. Costco always has a line. Stater Brothers usually has a line. So the kids are taking things off the candy shelf, which I still do not know why grocery stores put the candy right here. They put it there because you end up buying it for the kid, because the kid says, can I have that? No. Can I have that? I said no. Can I have that? No. Can I have that? Okay. Take it, and so they end up being able to sell it. And she'll use humor like, oh, nobody likes a line, do they? Or, oh, it's so hard to stand in line, even for me as an adult. So she sort of uses that to sort of soften the environment rather than people just continuing to stare. So. All right, next one. I want to be understood when I say I'm mentally and physically exhausted. Parenting a child with special needs can be a 24/7 stressful experience. I'm going to get to the next slide right away here because it sort of demonstrates how that is. Okay, so here's the scenario. Mealtime, anything but chicken nuggets, stressful. Car ride, turn the wrong way, stressful. Haircut, no way, Jose, too stressful. Walking through a parking lot? Nope. Stressful. If you dig into the research, the levels of chronic stress experienced by mothers of kids with disabilities are similar to those of combat soldiers. So combat soldiers they're in the bunker, they're waiting for the bomb to go off behind them, they're waiting for their general to come in and scream at them that their bed's not made correctly. They're ready for an inspection that they didn't expect. They're ready to ship out at any time. And that stress level, even when they're sleeping, highly, highly stressed. And I'm glad that soldiers now, when they come back, are getting PTSD kinds of therapy and medication and groups that can help with that. But moms deal with that probably 60 years if you have a child that's born with a disability and you are still living with them as an adult, and you're 80 and they're 60, and you still have that level of stress, especially for kids who get up in the middle of the night. I mean, you think of, okay, I need a lock on my door that's up here, but then now I feel guilty because what happens if there's a fire? We're not going to be able to get out of the house quickly because I have to negotiate unlocking that. Or they wander through the house and take things out of the fridge and empty everything in the drawers in the dining room, so I need to put some kind of lock on their bedroom door. Well, you hear stories about people arrested because they lock their kids in the room. I mean, but you need to be able to sleep too. And so what kind of stresses, Victoria, would be easy for you to share with people so they can relate a little bit more too?
Everything is stressful.
Yeah, everything is stressful.
Everything is stressful. Well, I take that back. We do have some great moments. We do have fun. We do have great times. But yeah, like you mentioned, like just like the military people, you're always on alert. You're always on, unless they're completely asleep. But even if they're asleep, they might wake up. So you still have to have one ear listening to that side. But the truth is, it's just like a toddler. When we say that when they're quiet, I'm probably in trouble because something is going down. My daughter is turning 7, and if she's not watching TV or she's not asleep and she's quiet somewhere, I better go check because it might be my makeup, it might be even detergent, it might be anything. So you have to be alert all the time, and you have to, most likely you have to have them at eyesight where you can see where they are, and there's nothing like quiet time unless it's a locked room or they have headphones and watching something or listening to something. And I mean, you end up getting tired. The stress, for me, I feel like if you've asked me how I'm doing, I've told you fine but tired. That has been my default answer, which is so true. Most of the time, you're tired. You just get tired from just being on all the time and attending to something. And on top of that, you're still running to go and do therapies. And advocating is the most stressful part of being a parent with special needs, because Monday through Sunday, everywhere you go, including church, our church, thankfully, is doing a great job. There are gaps here and there, but the church we are in, it's great that they are willing to listen and make changes and accommodate. But the truth is, everywhere you go, you have to advocate for your child, and otherwise, things will not work out for them. It's like this world was not meant for them, and so we have just to advocate and make accommodations for them everywhere we go. So it gets very stressful and exhausting, but there's hope, and God got us. So we hang in there.
For sure. And we're sort of painting, I mean, you're going to go away saying, this is sort of depressing or this is sort of negative, but I think that it's reality, and so it needs to be discussed. So I'm sure that when Vicki brings her car into the parking lot and has an appointment with the principal, the secretaries are like, oh no, not her again. But she has to be the one that's looking out for her child, because all of the other teachers just want a certain pattern that most kids will follow when they're first grade, but Janelle doesn't necessarily follow that. And so you're not going to be the most popular person on the PTA board, or you're not going to be the most popular parent at the school or at the preschool, because you are constantly asking, okay, is this really important that my child walks like this to recess? Or is it okay that her hands are at her side? Well, we've always had kids walk with their hands behind their back. Well, okay, so who made that rule, and why is it that important? If she's not touching anybody, why can't she just walk with her hands by her side? And so that freaks out people that aren't used to making accommodations for kids. So, all right, next one, Jeff. Okay, when I first met Janelle, she was 3, and I was going to start helping with their IEPs, preschool, and you had just come from Kenya and didn't realize that the whole special education is such a huge thing in the United States, and there's meetings that you feel really guilty at, and they use all these terms that you don't understand. And I remember going over just to get to know Janelle a little bit, and I told her mom afterwards, I said, I think she's reading, even though she didn't have very many words at that time. And so this picture of the iceberg is really a good picture for you to have, that you see the top part, you see the behaviors, you see the throwing food, you see the no mommy screaming in the grocery store, you see parents that maybe have a leash on their child because, and you think, oh, that's like for a dog, why would a parent do that? You see other things and you make a quick judgment, but we don't see the whole picture of the strengths of the kid, the strengths of the family. I know that Joseph and Victoria are fierce advocates for their kids. They will look you straight in the eye and say, no, that's not best for my family right now. And a lot of you would have a hard time saying that to someone, even your mother or your mother-in-law when they're over, wanting to give your kids Smarties, and no, that's not best for her right now. You think, oh, I don't want that confrontation. But it builds a resiliency and a strong leadership of this is the way my family needs to be in order for us to be able to survive. And these are my kids' strengths. You know, Jenna loves to play with her brother. She's so cuddly and wants to give you a hug and interested in everything. So if you're walking down the street, there's a bug and there's a flower and there's a piece of trash and there's this, and everything is cool, and I want to look at it, and I want to know what it is, and how does this work? And so what we see on the top isn't necessarily describing the whole person. It's probably the same thing with any of you. You're all sitting very quietly, nodding your heads, appropriate social skills, but you're probably making a list in your head of what you need at the grocery store on the way back, what needs to be cleaned up so that when your husband gets home from work, it looks like at least there's a pathway to the kitchen, who you need to call, who you need to apologize to. You're all multitasking, but you're appropriately being able to look forward. Kids with special needs aren't doing that. They're, oh, what about the macaroni and cheese today, in the middle of what you're saying. And so that's seen as a negative thing rather than, oh, okay, the child's thinking about that. That's cool. So that could be a strength. Anything you want to add about strengths?
You covered
No?
it all.
Okay. And teachers and Sunday school teachers and neighbors, they won't necessarily point out those strengths. As you heard from Victoria, just a quick phone call that you did great with your kids at Costco. I mean, she's going to remember that for the next 6 months. Jenna, they took their first vacation in a hotel, even though their children are 9 and they have twins, 9 that are very disabled, and then their 3-year-old who's just been diagnosed with autism. They spent the night in a hotel for the very first time. And they thought it was going to be horrendous, and hardly anybody slept all night, but they stayed in the room. They brought their kids' own food, and so that was a very comforting, and it was a great wolf lodge, and all their kids love water. And so, and it's all locked in. You can't get out. It's not like a splash pad where you could go run out in the street and stuff too. And they had a wonderful time. The older boy wanted to climb up this wall where you slide down the water, and he kept falling. And 2 young boys came and said, oh, we'll help him. And they helped him, and the 3 of them went over onto the slide, and then the kids ran off to do something else. And she said she cried for an hour, and she will remember that the rest of her life, that kids were actually helping. And your kids growing up, if you decide to homeschool, if you decide to do public school, they're going to meet a lot of kids with disabilities. And so I think the generation that's growing up now is going to be much more accepting than the generation that I grew up in. I mean, the kids with special needs were across the fence over here, and the teacher would even say, don't look at them because then they're going to want to be your friend. It's like, really? I mean, that was sort of the discussion. But now I think you see kids with disabilities at the park. You see kids with disabilities in churches, at least 6 of the 200 EV-free churches. You see kids, in the community. And so it's a little bit more of a not such a unique experience. Yeah, you were holding your mic up. Did you want to say something? No, okay, all right. Okay, next one. Okay, next slide. Oh, you got it. It's our disabilities. It's not our disabilities, it's our abilities that count. And I think that's what parents tell their kids all the time. The schools probably aren't telling them that. Churches aren't necessarily telling them that. And so we need to be able to be supportive to parents that are raising their kids with special needs and saying, gosh, you did great hitting that ball. I mean, next time maybe let's not break the window when we hit it. I'm going to get you a different ball so it's softer. But wow, you got a lot of strength in those arms hitting that ball. Don't make assumptions about a child's potential based on a label, especially with the term autism or autism spectrum disorder or ASD or there's so many different terms. Politically, it changes all the time, just like we used to use the term mental retardation. It's not used anymore, and so terms are changing all the time, but sometimes people think, okay, kid with autism is, somebody said, intelligent. So if you saw that movie Rain Man, I mean, somebody dropped toothpicks in the elevator, and he knew there's 369,000 toothpicks, and he knew immediately. And some people have that kind of memory, and so there is an intelligence with that, but not every person with autism has that. Not every person with a developmental disability has Down syndrome. Not every person in a wheelchair, doesn't walk at all. I mean, and so there's lots of things besides the label. All right. Next one. Both Vicki and I love this. Keep staring. You might cure my child's autism, then we can work on your social skills. So I don't know what it is about staring. I mean, I keep telling people on the worship team that I think it's great. If you attend church, you've probably seen Mark Corin. He's the African-American guy. He's on the rotation for worship, and he stands and he worships like this the whole time. And I think it's really good for people to stare appropriately, because now it's like, oh, okay, well, he's got some good rhythm going there, but he's even got the rhythm when they're announcing the next song, and so it just doesn't have to do with the music. But wow, if they accept him up on the stage, then maybe they'll accept me with my depression or with my irritability at my kids or with my failing marriage or fill in the blank. And so I think that sometimes having the ability to stare appropriately is a good thing, but it's also a social skill deficit if you're staring too much. So, all right, there's just two more things we want to discuss. Vicki found this picture, and I thought it was really good. So we think, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'll come back to that one. Okay, so every child's different, every family's different. We want to be treated fairly, all of us. But fairness is not everyone gets the same, but that everyone gets what they need. And so I may need things explained to me in very small steps with a picture paired with it. Someone else may just need the written directions handed to them, and they're fine. And so that's different than what I need. It might be different than what you need, but that doesn't mean it's unfair. So there's this really cool video that most teacher programs show. It's called Fat City. FAT stands for frustration, anxiety, and tension. And it makes all of the people in the audience that's watching immediately disabled by the way that the presenter is presenting things. And people start to sort of wiggle, they get their phones out, they sort of scratch their head, they turn around because they're so uncomfortable with how they're feeling, and they're doing exactly what kids with disabilities do in class. They don't understand what's going on, their shirt's a little scratchy, oh, they see a bird outside, the teacher's talking about what a noun is, and they raise their hand, and the teacher calls on them, we're having pizza tonight, and the kids all, we're not talking about pizza, and the teacher rolls their eyes. And so fairness is giving the kids what they need, and so sometimes the kids need to be outside on the playground rather than listening to the Bible story, and that's absolutely Jesus to them on that day. Sometimes kids need to be up at 8:30 even when they go to bed usually at 6. because that's the only time that daddy's going to get to see them because he's going on a trip. And so fairness is different. So go one back. And here's a really good visual of that. So they're trying to watch the ball game. If everything's equal, then some of the kids aren't going to be able to see it. But equity or fairness means you're giving them what they need in order to level the playing field. Make sense? Okay. All right. This just has our information, and the PowerPoint is going to be up. If we would love to continue conversation with you, I'm not even sure what time we're supposed to be done. Right now? Okay.